Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to SF DocFest. I'm Chris Metzler, one of the programmers here at the Film Festival. As you can see, since we're doing this kind of pre-recorded Q&A, we're still in the kind of topsy-turvy world of the pandemic. So that means we're a hybrid film festival with both screenings live and in person at the Roxy Theater, and then also here online in the comfort of your own home. You just had a chance to see the really wonderful film Objects, and we're lucky enough to have Vincent Liotta and Robert Kolwitz here. Welcome, guys.
Hi.
A good, I think one of the things that many people always wonder is like, how does someone decide to make a documentary? Like, what was the kind of inspiration where you're like, this is the rabbit hole that you wanted to go down, and you knew there was a film here, Vincent?
This came out of a conversation that I had with Robert, actually. We were talking on the phone, and this was a while back, almost 8 years ago. We were talking about things that we had and why they were important to us. And we started to realize how not important they were to other people around us, people that we're very close to, like our wives, that things that meant the world to us. And these are things like in the film that come to you accidentally that you would never, you'd grab them and run from a house fire with them. But they're things that are completely meaningless to other people. And we started to, in talking, we started to realize how very different certain people are, how there's like a tribe of people who have things that have this emotional resonance and they're very meaningful, and other people that don't see it at all. In fact, they just see them for what they are. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized, well, there's a film in there somewhere.
And when Vincent reached out to you, Robert, like were you kind of gung-ho to kind of share your passion about this?
I think we started by reaching out to him. We at Radiolab, we were doing a story on this very question.
Oh, interesting.
My wife has a peculiarly literal version of what a fork is a fork. And if that fork had been plunged into the heart of Napoleon and then sucked on by Dracula, it would still be a fork to her. Well, I would put it in some kind of a frame, of course. And so the plan was to see if we could get her to find something of deeper interest than just the thing itself. So we went and thought about it. We went to the Explorers Club in New York City, which has crazily wonderful things. And we brought her in and we sat her on the Empress of China's throne for 1,000 years. Empresses successively, one after the other, had sat and said, now you sit on it. Tamar is her name. She sat on it dutifully, like a toilet or something, like, how long do I have to sit here? And then we graduated it up. We took her to touch Wilbur and Orville Wright's wings from their plane. We then finally, we got to the pièce de résistance, which was, I believe, wrapped in a box inside a velvet thing, with a string you had to open up, was a flag which had been left on the surface of the moon by Apollo blah, 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 and then picked up later after a 2-year stint by Apollo blah, blah, blah. Then brought back and wrapped in this bag, and hardly anyone had been able to see it, touch it, or certainly feel it, and she was going to have the chance. And she opens it up, takes the flag, and says, okay, can I have lunch now? And just wanted to leave. And Vin and I would because spiritually he's like me, I would just complain to him about her, and then he decided to come. I think then he decided to come over to my house and just tootle around a bit. I think after you contributed to the Radiolab, you did one of your stories.
While you guys were doing the Radiolab, I had started doing the film, and I had interviewed Rick already, the fellow with the egg.
Yeah.
And then so
then we decided.
Dad said, "Why don't you? Well, we're doing this too. Why don't you come talk to us about this guy with the egg?"
Then we had the catastrophe that those of you who've just seen the film, and if you haven't, you shouldn't be watching this. You should go look at the film first.
Spoilers here, everybody. Go back, watch the movie.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is then the two things start to interweave. The film Radiolab becomes materially involved in the narrative of the documentary that we're making. And that was fun.
But then it was interesting because I think we both realized that there is something in the air that really does divide people by, just in some deep personality way. There are people who can attach to objects all kinds of emotional worlds and feelings, and there are people who just think that's silly and wrong. I thought that for the Radiolab audience, the tilt would be heavily in my favor and far against my wife's. Jad, who was my partner on Radiolab, seemed quite convinced that it was the opposite. So we had a telephone poll, and my wife beat me 4-1, which amazed me because I thought that people who want to go to a show that is all about giggles and soft spots and wonder and things like that would of course want to rub their faces into Wilbur and Orville's wing from their plane, and apparently they don't. It's very disappointing to me, actually.
Yeah.
But then we had the movie to make up for it. So that now in the movie we are surrounded by like-minded people acting weird but together, and that's nice. It's sort of the clubhouse.
Yeah. You know, what's interesting is that just from the social media end of the film, somebody out there, I think maybe a psychologist, looked at the film and then commented on Twitter that this is not a personality style. This is a dysfunction. And
Yeah.
you know, that was part of the film too. Like, how could we get away from thinking about this as something dysfunctional? And you know, because you look at the people in the film, Robert, Rick, Heidi, everybody seems maybe not completely normal, but quite happy and well adjusted, and they like their things and they love their family, and everybody seems pretty well balanced. So
where is it written that the richer, more vivid, more drunken experience is somehow less normal? I mean, it seems to me you should want to be me.
enjoy your symptoms, right?
Yeah.
Well, you know, it is raised a question with, you know, in your kind of discussions and discovery, did folks that really loved like a specific object, could they transfer that, understand, empathize with the folks that love something different, in the sense that could they translate that passion, do you think? You know?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people would say things like, you know, they tell me about their special object, and it would have some resonance for them. They'd empathize with the people in the film because they had something that was meaningful. And most people do. I think they have to really search for it and realize that their thing is really just the same as Rick's egg or Robert's thing. There are some people though that aren't able to do that, that aren't able to empathize and transfer whatever it is in their life that has meaning. Maybe they don't have any object that has resonance for them. And like Tamar, it's just a thing, you know, the thing is just that thing. Like
now it's
any
getting
other
serious
thing.
because when you get old, like you're not supposed to have, when you die, you're not supposed to have like 3,000 meaningless objects that only you understand the value of, because like, what are your kids supposed to do? They're going to be burying what? Odd forks, strange spoons. Like what was dad thinking? So my wife has decided that I should have a death cleaning. She calls it. I should just get rid of everything before, because when I die, their value will disappear. It will be annihilated. So why not just do it in the right order? Get rid of them before someone asks, "What's this?" It's out of respect for the spoon. You get rid of the spoon early, that's an interesting sort of. It's a subtle campaign she's waging here.
Yeah,
No,
and that's something that Heidi talks about at the end of the film, that she's got all this stuff, so now she wants to get rid of it before she leaves it to her kids to deal with. And I think
thought maybe I would annotate mine. I would say, if you're wondering why this spoon is here, I'll tell you a story. And then there'll be a little envelope attached.
Right. Your own little
My kids would
museum.
go.
And it's interesting because when you go through a deceased parent's person's things and you're responsible for disposing of them, you sort of you make buckets or piles of things, and they're things that, you know, you look at them and you say, I'd be lucky if Goodwill took this, and you know, you send it up and you throw it away. And there are other things that, you know, you've got the Antiques Roadshow thing going on in the back of your head. This could be thousands of dollars, and of course, at best, it's worth maybe $10, but maybe there's an auctioneer that'll sell it, but you don't have any connection. Then there are the things where you pick this thing up and bang, it just hits you. It stabs you in the heart. It's like, I remember when my father got this thing. Like, this thing is so special, and you know, someone will say, well, it's, you know,
a cufflink.
Teaspoon.
What's a cufflink?
Yeah, a coupling or something like that. And those are the things that you keep and you don't get rid of. You don't sell them, you
Mhm.
don't throw them away.
Yeah.
Well, and that's where like the storytelling is important part too, right? Is that is it's the object, but also be able to share the story with the object so that they can be passed along, you know. So if you let's say you have your father's cufflinks, right? It's like, I mean, I deal with this with my children where it's like this was your nana's or your great grand, you know, and the reason why it has value is this. And if you don't, if once you take the context away, um, you lose what's kind of personal in that way. And so it's just like how do you like and kind of like Robert's saying, it's like how do you make sure that that note is always with that object so it's passing along.
Right.
It
Yeah.
always comes back to a story, right? You have to tell a great story. You have to tell your children the great story behind the thing, and then they remember the story. And then the object is important to them because it's connected to the story. Without the story, it isn't really worth anything even
Right.
to
And if you watch the movie, there's a really almost a scientific experiment done where two people invite very good storytellers to just lay a story on an absolutely meaningless ashtray and see if the object can acquire a value, and then the value is measured in dollars on eBay. So it's a yeah, if you watch this movie, you can actually watch this being thought through fairly carefully, actually.
Yeah.
You,
Josh and Rob in the movie do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know what I think is really great about this movie, and one of the reasons why I love to kind of screen certain types of films at film festivals, like this is the sort of film that when you walk out of the theater or when you turn off the TV, if you're watching it with somebody else, you're going to have a conversation, you know?
Oh yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
I guess and I think I think people are going to be amazed by who their friends and family are and the different kind of disparate ways that they see things and what's important to them, you know? So I think it's a great kind of, good, and it's kind of the sort of film that you're going to want to talk about now that we're going back to backyard barbecues and things. It's like, I just saw this great movie and, it's just, it's really fun in that way. Given both of your guys kind of background in regards to different storytelling, whether it be radio and film and in writing, like how did kind of crafting a feature documentary, how was that different than um, you know telling stories on the radio or on TV? Like what was like how did that kind of at its essence, was it the same thing or was there kind of a different, was this a different beast in some way?
It's definitely it is different. You've got these story arcs, and you can't do them like an anthology. These three stories, one after another. You have to find the likenesses in them and the similarities, the echoes in them, and what starts to happen is they start to connect with each other. But finding those connections took a long time. This was one of those films that took a long time thinking about it. It was like making a sculpture. You put it all together and you think, wow, this is going to be great. And I would look at it early on and be like, this is not great. This is just a bunch of random stories thrown together. Like what are they all say? Like what does each person add to the overall idea of the film, and how do their stories intertwine? And it slowly had to be teased out. It took longer. It took a long time to do that. It was kind of tricky. It wasn't like there was this one big story that happened and we were there to cover it.
Yeah, I think when a film works, it makes it look easy, and like if you go back to like Errol Morris's Fast, Cheap, and Out of Control, which I
I
find
love
is
that
such a
film.
wonderful movie, you're just like, and then you try to replicate, it, and you're like, wait,
Well, what is it about? I have a really hard time trying to explain to people what that film is about. First of all, it's one of my favorite films. And if I try to explain it, I mean, people just kind of glaze over. It's all in the storytelling, all in the
And the
filmmaking.
framing, really, and
Right?
the way he's so good at, like when he went to Vernon, Florida, thinking that he was
Yes.
going to meet a lot of people who'd shot off their fingers and toes, and they hadn't, or they weren't going to confess to it, and their toes are in shoes, and he can't like make them strip. He stuck them with all these people essentially not talking to him, and he made a movie called "They're Not Talking to Me," signed filmmaker, and I don't know, it was completely vivid. Now that's an extraordinary thing to be able to make something out of, in the Seinfeldian sense, out of literally nothing. This was determinedly nothing, and he made it into something.
And it's something that has a much deeper meaning. Sometimes that isn't quite obvious. Like going back
Yeah.
to Fast, Cheap, and Out of Control, it's got such a depth to it, but I'm not sure what it. I think I think that movie really is called um, the meaning of life to me. You know, there are these four people. What is the purpose of my life? Why do I live? Why do I do? And but that's never mentioned. I mean, that's all just under there. You know,
Yeah,
it's almost like there are two kinds of filmmaking. There are two kinds of movies. They're producer movies and they're director movies, right? The producer movie is, I just optioned this great book that everybody's read. Everybody wants to see the movie. I've got George Clooney. He's going to be in it. And, you know, we're going to, you know, you then like sort of, then you go to lunch, right? I mean, you sort of got, if you have the money to do that, you do this. So it's something that people want to see, the subject matter. They already love. But then there are movies that are really just in the telling. And those are kind of director's movies where it's, you know, I have this idea, it's kind of hand wavy and I'm not sure what it is. And you spend all this time agonizing over trying to figure out what it is. And the process of trying to figure out what it is actually making the film. And, you know, those are rewarding sometimes, but also sometimes it's hard. It's a hard sell. It's hard to pitch a film like that. It's even hard to promote a film like that because a lot of it's in the telling, and word of mouth is important.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think that's a good thing to think about, Vincent, because I share this kind of with so many of the films that we have as part of the festival. Is that so? SF DocFest was started about 20 plus years ago in an empty church in downtown San Francisco, and kind of local promoter here, our founder Jeff Ross, was just like he's like, I think people want to see quirky and interesting documentaries. And he's just like, I'm just going to put on a festival. And so for 3 days, he just took over this empty church and screened some of the weirdest documentaries you might see. And I actually attended that first festival. I wasn't, as part of it at the time. And I was just like, oh, awesome. People are making cool, quirky, director-driven movies. These are like what people want to see. And the thing about it is like a lot of the movies that we screen at the festival is like, you're seeing a filmmaker creator's passion kind of translated to film. But the idea is like these films were like, they weren't just birds in this instance. I mean, they fought to come out, and just because they're here now, we in the audience are here to help kind of champion them. We're lucky enough that you guys share your movies early on so that we can kind of be your early street team to kind of spread the word. And so I think, I know people are going to be loving this movie afterwards, and hopefully people talk about it on social media, but like, what's the way we can kind of spread the word about the film and kind of people can be on the lookout for it when it comes to, where the friends and family live, or just talk all about it.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it, this is a word of mouth film. However you can get the word out, social media, telling your friends that you think would like the film, directing them to the website so they can find out where it's streaming even after the festival. Those are the kind of things that it's kind of a grassroots approach. I think that's going to help us.
Cool. And what's the website again, Vincent?
It's objectsfilm.com.
Objectsfilm.com. Well, thanks again for making this great film, and it was fun chatting with you both. And obviously, thanks again for being part of SF DocFest.
You're welcome.
So
Thank you very much for having us.